Airing on Asheville FM 103.3 LPFM in Asheville, this is The Final Straw Radio, a weekly anarchist and anti-authoritarian broadcasts and podcast emanating out of occupied Chalagi land in southern Appalachia. We bring you voices and perspectives from projects and struggles all around the world, and you can find our archives, transcripts, ways to follow us and support us at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org. This week, we're sharing an interview Ian conducted with cartoonists Isabella Rotman, Sage Coffey, and Marnie Galloway on the subject of the abortion pill zine, a community guide to misoprostol and mifepristone. Out now from Silver Sprocket. They discuss the process by which this resource was assembled, the benefits of local-focused abortion organizing, and the timeliness and timelessness of the fight for safe abortion care and the power of comics to disseminate valuable and complex information. You can find links in the show note.
I'm here with Isabella Rotman, Sage Coffey, and Marnie Galloway. Thanks very much for taking the time to speak with us today. I was wondering if you could give listeners some background on yourselves and maybe speak to your backgrounds in comics and illustration and also in organizing.
Sure. I'm Isabella. I'm a cartoonist and illustrator. I've done a couple sexual health comics, Quick and Easy Guide to Consent, and Wait What, a comic book guide to relationships, bodies, and growing up. So I've been working at the intersection of comics and sex ed for a while.
My name's Sage Coffey. I use they, them pronouns. I've done a lot of autobio comics for the Washington Post and some humor comics for the New Yorker. And yeah, I've also done quite a bit of autobio work related to abortion, specifically working with We Testify to help abortion storytellers illustrate their stories, as well as Comics for Choice, contributing my own abortion story. Yeah, I've done a bunch of stuff. Oh, I'm also a previous organizer of Chicago Alternative Comics Expo.
Big fan of that. Thank you.
And I'm Marnie Galloway, pronouns she, her. I've been making comics for about 15 years, mostly in like literary fiction, poetic realm, and more autobio and diary recently. I'm faculty at the School of the Art Institute, Chicago. And before I started my kind of creative phase of my life as a working artist, I thought that my work for my life was going to be as a community organizer. I worked for a bit at the New York City AIDS Housing Network, which does kind of union style organizing for housing access rights. And I've taken a lot of the work that I learned in that phase of my life into my daily life, if not in my artwork.
Okay.
So it's all very, in life, nothing is left behind. It's all carried with us. And so that's also kind of a part of my DNA.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we're here today to discuss your recently published abortion pill zine, available for purchase and for free reading now at silversprocket.net. I know the answer is probably obvious, but I'm hoping you all can put a finer point on it. What was the impetus for making this zine?
We basically decided to do it the day that Roe v. Wade was overturned. I remember that day was, that day was really tough for a lot of people, and it was really tough for me. And I just remember racking my brain like, well, what can I do? I felt very, very powerless. And I'm a big believer in doing your activism along the lines of your personal strengths. Like what do you have to give? What is the best way for you to make change? So I was like, well, I make sex ed comics. I can make a comic about this. And I asked Marnie and Sage if they would be interested. And yeah, I don't know if you guys want to talk about how you felt at that time, why you wanted to make it.
Yeah, it was definitely, at least for me, I was just dumbfounded, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't really process what was happening. And I feel like making the zine and getting it started was kind of a way to take back control, right? And a way to help other people, obviously. When I had my abortion in 2016, I was very ignorant of abortion law. And I feel like I didn't really get involved until it affected me. And I think that's kind of a regret of mine, because it shouldn't have to affect you for you to care, right? But yeah, it's definitely something that not only helped me process parts of my abortion, as we talked about, like financial barriers and such, and emotional barriers in the zine. But it's something that I think having it as a wider resource is really important.
Yeah, Sage, I think you're being too hard on yourself by saying that getting down on yourself for not feeling like you were as active until it personally affected you. I think that's deeply human, and that's something that we all deal with and navigate in our lives as politically minded and empathetic people, right?
I was also going to chastise you for being too hard on yourself because there's quite a lot to care about. There's simply too much for one person to like put time into every single thing that must be cared about. So
y'all are too kind. Y'all are too great. Well, this is a running theme you will see.
Well, what I was going to say, so an old organizer mentor of mine kind of said, like, to avoid burnout, you got to choose a focus and hyper focus and dedicate as much as you can to it, because otherwise it's so easy to get distracted by all of the places that you could put energy, and you'd only have a finite amount of energy. And for me, since I was a teenager, gender liberation, reproductive justice, all of those have been where I've been paying attention. And even if, like I said before, that it wasn't where my creative professional expression went, it's where I've always been noticing and always been paying attention. I'm from Texas originally. I grew up in the South, and so I follow all of the restrictions that have been happening to reproductive access, abortion access specifically, for the last 15 years. That day of Dobbs was a punch in the gut, but it was a punch in the gut that I saw winding up for a really long time.
Yeah.
And so when Izzy texted, we're friends, and so we were texting and grieving together, and you said, I think that this is something that I want to do. And I said, if there's any room for collaborators, please loop me in. And it started there.
Had you all collaborated in the past?
I don't think on a professional level.
No.
Okay. Izzy used
We're friends.
Yeah, we're all friends. Izzy used to host a comics night that I would go to regularly. And then Marnie was also a previous organizer of Cake. So we're all very tertiary. Yeah. We're not tertiary because we're friends, but we're all,
The comics world is a small world.
Sure.
And so you get to know each other pretty quickly, especially people who vibe with each other, have been in making comics for about the same amount of time. Mm-hmm. You kind of start off early in the ranks and grow together. So awesome. We've known each other for a while.
Very cool.
I don't usually collaborate, but I thought it was really important with this that it come from multiple viewpoints. I think we all bring something different to it that's really important.
Yeah.
Well, with that in mind, it's a very, I think, big subject. Can you talk a little bit about how you put it together, and who you spoke to kind of get the information and organize everything?
That's me. It was a lot of research. So for the basis of it, I put together a doc of all the information that I wanted in it. That was, from a variety of resources: Planned Parenthood, Scarleteen, Plan C. There's really great resources online, and all of the information in this book is available elsewhere. We weren't running studies or anything like that. We're just trying to put the same publicly available information in a format that we think might reach some people it's not already reaching. And after that, I sent the doc to you guys. I can't remember your reaction to it.
I was just delighted. I thought, okay, we'll dig into research, and you sent over basically the completed script with all of the research done and annotated. I was like, oh, well, let's just go.
I was very, very impressed by how organized it was. I feel like usually when I lay out stuff, it's all right, here's a little here, here's a little there, here's a little there. You were like, okay, here's the section, what MISO does. Here's the section, what MIFA does. Here are the resources. It was very, very well organized. Thank
you. So then we did, but that's kind of dry. It's just information. We wanted to make it a little more entertaining to read, or else it might as well just be a medical pamphlet. So then we each took different sections and wrote them into actual script that was in voice and describing what images we were going to draw. So we each did our different sections, with the exception of the intro, which we did collaboratively, and the closing page.
On the subject of the format, and I hope this doesn't, pull away from the topic too much, it flows together very well, but I feel like you could very easily kind of chop it up for, infographic social media posts. Was that by design, or did that just kind of emerge organically?
It was on my mind. I mean, especially the pages about like how to actually take the medications. I was like, okay, I'd like this to be something that a medical clinic could photocopy and give to people to take home.
So, in general, what appeals to you about the comic and zine format? When it comes to transmitting this kind of information, what do you think makes the format uniquely useful?
I think we could all talk for hours about this.
This could be the whole hour. I think the main one is accessibility, right? There have been studies that show visual information rather than written information can be really helpful in taking in that information. How many times did I say information there? But yeah, visual accessibility and legibility, I think, were the main things.
And also, I think adding to that, like approachability, like there's something like mifepristone, misoprostol, like those are long, like drug names, and the idea of abortion can be intimidating, and having the information like kind of warm and soft and friendly and easy to digest, I think is something that I thought a lot about in how I was approaching drawing my pages.
Also, just the visual of what the pills look like. Because when you receive a prescription, even if it's multiple prescriptions, yes, they can be written out. But for someone who maybe doesn't read the label or has a hard time reading the label, maybe English is their second language, maybe they don't, it's really, really helpful to have that visual of like, here's what MIFA is, here's how you take it, here's where you put it, And
the zine format itself, like I have it here, like it's pretty wee, like it's small, like it's got a lot of information packed into its pages, but it could really easily slip into like a coat pocket. It's not burdensome. It's easy to pack and carry and share and distribute. And I think that's one of the things that I was really excited about also when Izzy came up with this pitch of this idea was, like, yes, it's all publicly available information. Yes, we're trying to make it more like visually like accessible, but also like strategically accessible, right? Like it's something, I have a friend who bought 20 and distributed them to little free libraries. Like it's just something that can be easily shared.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much, and I'm going to overlap like a lot of things you guys have said. Like Marnie, you were talking about the accessibility of it, and like at a gut level, I think that comics are innately non-pretentious. Like you can make a pretentious comic, but you have to try. And so I think like just the fact that it's a comic makes you feel like you're not being lectured at or talked down to, which is like such a great place to start, because usually that's like one of the biggest barriers to people like listening to you about anything. Another thing, like Sage was talking about, like absorbing information visually. And I had also seen studies about how information is absorbed better when it's presented both as written word and text, which I think is really great and like such a boon to comics. And yeah, with what Marnie was saying about format, like the fact that it's physical, and I hate to kind of be this dystopian about it, the fact that this is a physical book means that it's not in your search history. And that feels like something that I hope does not become important, but I'm glad that this exists in case that it does.
It's about the width of a pea coat pocket too.
Yeah, it's really quite wee.
One factor that is emphasized throughout the document, Zine, is the timeliness of the information. Some of the information is subject to change, but I wonder if you could maybe talk to what aspects of the information are static. And was ease of updating eventually or reversioning it a consideration when you were putting it together?
For me, this was the hardest part. I don't know if you guys agree, but the fact that I knew we were writing about something, specifically the legal barriers, that was going to change was really hard. I think that we leaned a lot on online resources and would trust those resources to stay. So we would instruct the reader to go to the online resource and trust those resources to stay up to date. But it was really challenging. Personally, I think it's pretty unlikely that the actual way the pills work will change.
Oh yeah, that's been the same since
they started. So I think that information is pretty static. So even if the pill, like there are more barriers to getting them, I think that information stays good. Another thing we put in there was focusing on how to have an abortion with misoprostol alone. So the recommended regimen is a combination of mifepristone and misoprostol, but abortion is actually still very safe and effective just with misoprostol. And most of the efforts to prevent medical abortion have revolved around mifepristone because that is the primary use of misoprostol, whereas misoprostol has other medical uses outside of abortion. So it's going to be much harder for them to prevent access to misoprostol. So by putting in how to do a medical abortion with misoprostol alone was kind of us saying like, okay, here's what this might be what happens, and it's still safe and effective.
Yeah, I think as far as evergreen information goes, also emotional support and emotional barriers. Yes. I don't think any of that will change anytime soon. You know, even if like a federal abortion ban goes through, you're still going to need that support network. We also had a preparedness checklist. I feel like that will be evergreen.
Just to maybe tie it into another piece of it, and you all can comment if you like, but I was very, I guess, struck, like it occurred to me, but you really emphasized that abortion has been around for time immemorial, and, you know, it will continue to be regardless of the legality. But, you know, maybe on that note, were you at all concerned with the legality of sharing this information? And I wonder what steps you took to ensure your own safety and the safety of readers in this regard. I think that you maybe spoke to this a little bit before, but if there's anything that you wanted to add to it.
We definitely had, Izzy, maybe you should answer this though. Like we had a legal team look over everything to make sure that all of the information that we shared was, of course, legally accurate. We had, you know, people who were medical experts look over it to make sure it was medically accurate. But as far as the legal concerns, I can say personally, you know, before we got started on this, because I have been, you know, paying very close attention to the 30-year plan of this, right? Of not just federal abortion ban, but also I think eventual like all sorts of reproductive limitations. I had a conversation with my husband. I was like, should I use a pen name? Like, is this something that I need to be aware of? I have 3 small children. I've done other autobio work that could make it pretty easy to find who and where I am, you know, like this is something that I didn't take lightly. And then I was like, you know, like, no, I'm very, very, very proud of having done this work. And with the kind of broader legal advice that we got that I think Izzy can speak to better, like I felt good moving forward.
Yeah, we did have someone look it over, you know, not someone who is actually like legally representing us, but just a lawyer who was willing to look it over, who is really well versed on this topic. And the consensus was generally like, this is nothing you're doing is a problem. Like you're not giving medical advice, you're sharing information, but that can change and the trend is towards that changing. So like with the laws in Texas and what was I forget the other state about you can be sued for aiding and abetting. That's a concern. Like that is a thing that could happen. Like we have not done anything illegal, but we could face legal repercussions. So that's a risk we all chose to take. We all chose to not use a pen name. That's a meeting that we had. And hopefully there's no repercussions from that. We are fortunate to all live in states that have access to abortion and seem very firm on maintaining that. So hopefully that's another level of protection for us too.
Am I correct that you are all geographically dispersed? And I wonder if you could each speak to, if that's the case, can you speak to the current state of access to MISO and MIFE in your respective regions?
We all met in Chicago, but I now live in Maine, which I think actually there's excellent access to abortion care in Maine, including medical abortion. Yeah, it's a good state. And Chicago is now a beacon in the Midwest.
Yeah, we're surrounded on all sides by restricted abortion states. But Illinois, no abortion restriction, full access to both pills. So,
And yeah, so I am in Chicago and have been here my whole adulthood, but all of my family is in Texas. And, I grew up across the South. And so I pay, as I said before, I pay very, very close attention to what's happening there. And Texas continues to be a kind of at the front of the Texas and Florida, right, are kind of competing about which is going to be the first to do the most restrictive legal, I'm trying not to curse, legal restrictions, right? So as Izzy mentioned before, you can be prosecuted for aiding and abetting in Texas, even for mailing mife or miso to somebody in Texas. I think that it's a New York doctor who's currently being protected by SHIELD laws for having sent abortion pills to a patient in Texas, and they're trying to extradite her to prosecute her. So I put my roots down in Chicago for a reason. This is where I want to be, but I'm, my bones are there.
Yeah.
And so I'm very concerned.
Am I correct that the organizers with whom you associate, you're seeing them kind of do their best to work in solidarity with those places where the access is limited?
I think nationally, of course, everybody who's working on this beat, trying to maintain access and safe access for people needing abortions. Everybody's working in solidarity. I'm not involved in any of those other organizations, but information is certainly shared broadly.
I think it's important to note that they're just circles of people who help each other, right? It's not even necessarily dedicated organizations. It's more abortion caregivers, people who have had abortion, storytellers, lawyers, providers. There's a lot of solidarity in the whole network, regardless of geolocation.
That kind of brings to mind my next question, and that is, to what extent are the organizations who have typically been associated with abortion and reproductive care, Planned Parenthood, for instance, are they taking up this fight in a way that you find meaningful and appropriate? Do you feel like they're not doing enough? I guess the general nonprofit approach, I feel like, is one that is lacking and one that hinges on kind of the approval of the funders, essentially the state.
Yeah.
Since the Hyde Amendment, especially which bans federal funding for abortion, it's particularly hard for organizations to get funding to provide care. I have my own qualms with Planned Parenthood specifically, but that doesn't negate the fact that they do have tons of locations that provide care, right?
And so many kinds of care.
Yeah, so many. They provide HRT. A lot of people don't know that. They can provide HRT for trans and non-binary individuals.
Normal gynecology, just stuff. Yeah. And contraception.
I understand wanting to hold every institution to the highest possible standard.
Sure.
And I think that it's absolutely necessary and crucial to call out places where people are falling short of that standard. And also, I think it's unreasonable to expect every single organization to live up to that standard for all of the various reasons, right? There's the Hyde Amendment and nonprofit access and all of these, that for Planned Parenthood. It's a huge beast of a organization that offers so many kinds of not just individual medical support, but advocacy work. It's a big organization and therefore not very nimble. That's just the nature of an institution being so big. They have a lot of weight to carry and I think therefore a lot of responsibility to shoulder, but they're not as nimble as organizations that are hyper focused on expanding legal access to abortion care and reproductive rights. I think that calling out Planned Parenthood for their shortcomings is absolutely appropriate without, ignoring the, I think, truly vital care, especially affordable care that they provide. I think it's just there's something that I've been thinking about a lot in my personal life and in my activist work is where is it most crucial to focus? And I think focusing on those organizations that can be nimble, that can be kind of at the front, that can push a more radical agenda, I think is where I'm wanting to put my energy rather than on these big behemoths that have to move slower.
and working at like a state level, like finding your local funds, like, and supporting them and their efforts, finding abortion storytelling nonprofits like We Testify, like working with those smaller, much smaller and more locally focused organizations is like it's one of the pillars of community building. It's one of the pillars of like just making sure you're all looking out for each other, you know? Yeah.
And that, not to put maybe a finer point on it, that as, I guess, institutional organizations retreat in order to kind of maintain themselves, so to speak, if that makes sense, those smaller, more focused organizations, or I guess affinity groups maybe even, can meet those needs more directly and more quickly. Okay.
To the best of their ability.
Sure.
I think
it's hard.
Yeah, it's very hard, and it's important to recognize that there is no perfect activist.
Sure.
There is no perfect organization. Sure. Finding one surprisingly is more easy. There are actually databases, National Network of Abortion Funds being one of them, to find the places that need that help and need that attention, and can potentially, depending on, of course, the legality and such, provide that care.
Well, what I was going to say, I'm sorry, just briefly piggybacking, is like abortion, like those networks that Sage was talking about, like you can find organizations that are working like nationally, right? Like you can find a place in Mississippi that is the one place that is still providing care, or that is the one place in Alabama that is working hard, that is at the forefront of that state's work to nudge forward like legal access in that state. So you can hone and find ways to support, even if it's just financially, right? Like I think you have to work locally as best as you can, but also in solidarity nationally. And so because my places of solidarity are in Texas and here in Chicago, that's where I focus my attention.
Sure. To maybe get back to the zine itself, one thing that I really appreciated was the representation of different bodies and different expressions of gender. Can you explain why that's so important?
I feel like we opened up talking about like just having an own personal experience with abortion, right? Like abortion is not restricted to gender. There are trans men who have abortions. There are non-binary people who have abortions. There are people who are differently bodied who have abortions. There are people with different religions who have abortions. Like it was important to represent everyone in that sense, because all those groups can have abortions,
Yeah. No, I just like, yes. And also like my focus was a lot on non-binary people and trans men, because a lot of abortion resources ignore them.
Yeah. There a lot of pamphlets and stuff don't use inclusive language. Even where I got my abortion, which is Chicago Women's Health Center, women is right there, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wandering in as a trans non-binary guy, like, hey,
yeah.
But yeah, that's another thing, because that kind of language, just restricting abortion care language to just women can be very, very distressing for somebody who's already going through such a distressing time.
It's just the last thing they need.
Right. It's truly like picking you while you're down.
Yeah, it's like you're having a really bad day, and then someone just
it's like, hey, did you know you're a woman?
Would you say that is by design?
What is by design?
That kind of restrictive language.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I think it's, well, I think in most cases, no, but in some cases, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, I think institutionalized transphobia is very real. I think on personal levels from providers, either it may come from ignorance or it may come from just like, they've never had a trans patient, Mm-hmm. And like, this is the habits that they fall into language wise. I do think there should be more broader LGBTQIA plus education to make, ensure that we're welcome in these types of spaces. But it's kind of hard to separate that lack of inclusive language with intent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think
like
at this
on an
point,
institutionalized level.
At this point, it's 2025. Like we know,
right?
We know
exactly.
that we need to be including people, and to not is intentionally dehumanizing.
Also,
right?
it's easy to do.
Yeah,
right. It's incredibly easy.
It's easy.
The point of restricting abortion access and the point of restricting reproductive access and the whole it's about dehumanizing. It's about dehumanizing people and limiting people's access to full humanity. And I think that our goal for this zine is, it's information sharing, it's colorful, it's like a more joyful way of talking about this thing that can be very burdensome, but it's also like, hey, we see you, whole person, whoever you are that's looking at this, whether you're whatever, regardless of gender, regardless of as Izzy was saying, race, ethnicity, body type, religion, you are a whole person and you're experiencing this extremely human need. And I think we speak for all of us, it was never a question to do anything other than be intentionally and focusedly inclusive.
Yeah.
I also think just abortion storytelling in general is so dominated by cis white women. It just made sense to have more people, more people from all different backgrounds, and yeah.
The Final Straw is a proud member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts, and here's a jingle from another member of CZN.
I know the kind of pain you're feeling, Alex. I once had it myself.
You some kind of doctor?
No, Alex. I am Magneto, and I have come to offer you sanctuary.
Hello, this is our jingle for our podcast, The Grounded Futures Show.
This is the show where we discuss topics ranging from climate change to identity to how youth can gain new skills to thrive amid current and ongoing disasters that we are collectively facing. We are your hosts, one Gen Z Liam and one Gen X Carla. And we think we all deserve to thrive now and not in some distant utopian future.
Yeah, but that's in the future. Oh, I hate the future.
Yeah, we're with Bolin. Grounded Futures is a larger project, so check that out over at groundedfutures.com.
Hey folks, just to break with the standard messaging, we are a little bit lower at this point in our Patreon support than the cost of producing transcripts monthly, let alone the printing and other operational costs of running the show. The producers of the show, the editors, the interviewers don't get paid. So this is just to make sure that there are transcripts that are easily translatable, that are very readable and correct and can get sent into prisoners, for instance, let alone saving up for new equipment or anything like that fun stuff. If you would like to support the show, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TFSR. For $3 plus a month, you can get access to early episodes. For $5 plus a month, we'll send you some stickers as well as those free episodes. $10 a month plus, you get a zine, sometimes stickers sent to you in the mail. So these neat thank you gifts. And then it goes on from there. If you don't feel like you can make a regular contribution or you don't want to support Patreon, there are ways to do regular contributions through LibrePay or PayPal, or you can make a one-time donation through Stripe or LibrePay or Venmo or PayPal, or there's a lot of different ways that you could send us some cash. We would appreciate it, but of course the best way is even a small recurring donation allows us to work through the budget. Anyway, thanks for the housekeeping time, and on with the show.
Who are the enemies of access to safe abortion care?
So here's my list.
And I guess by extension, what are they doing, and who isn't doing enough to help? And maybe that's a bad way to phrase that question, and we can cut it if you don't like what you all come up with. But interested to hear how you would phrase it.
it's just such a huge question, right?
Yeah,
And
it's
I think
a very large question. I mean, we can go like directly to like now, like
we can just
Elon
just
Musk
like
being a pro-natalist white supremacist.
I know. I was
Sure.
just gonna say white nationalists, like supremacist patriarchy.
If it's too
like,
big of a
the
question,
problem.
I can move on. It's fine.
I mean, I can name one guy who's like kind of leading the charge.
yeah, right now.
All right. I feel like the existence of this zine addresses shortcomings in the transmission of information from institutions that would once have been charged with dispersing it. Is taking up the task of getting this information out, is it empowering for you, or does it make you feel resentful that it falls to you?
I never once would have thought about feeling resentful. Okay. I think for myself, like I think of this as like one point in what should be constellation, right? Like there are a lot of different ways of accessing information, hopefully. And by adding one more, hopefully we've made it easier for even just one person to understand what safe medical abortion can look like.
Yeah, I don't think it also didn't occur to me that someone else should have done it. I mean, I imagine if I went to the clinic for my mifepristone and misoprostol and no one gave me a pamphlet about how to take it, I might feel that way. But I was honored to be able to be part of making this and grateful for something to do that felt powerful.
Yeah, I never once saw it through the lens of like resentment. I think that's a very powerful word, resentment. I saw it more as like a community service and almost like a service to my past self. For information that should be widely accessible regardless of whether or not you need an abortion, whether or not you need that information. Because, Izzy, you just mentioned like, if you had been given a pamphlet, like if you were going to get in the pills, I think about, the shame that prevented me from going to friends, right? And talking about my abortion or asking for support. And I think it was a really big thing. I went through my abortion completely alone. I was living by myself.
I remember when you told me being like, you could have called.
I know. I like at the time I didn't know because, shame and stigma are very, very strong against abortion. And one of the big things for this scene, at least for me, is destigmatizing it. There are politicians who won't even say abortion, I think Biden didn't say the word abortion until like way, way late in his presidency. There's a lot of power to be had in making this scene, I think.
I'd also say, I think it's something that Izzy said early on in our conversation, like it felt really powerful, but also like special and great to be able to use this very niche skill set that I have of cartooning. Yes. To be able to use this niche skill set that I have for something that felt like a really positive good in the world that is going to be useful and informative for people that I will never meet. Like that felt really, really important at a time when otherwise it's easy to feel powerless.
Yeah.
Coming back around to the assertion of, the nimble local organizations, I think that maybe speaking only for myself as a cis male, I kind of always associated like Planned Parenthood with the be all and end all. And I guess I always just kind of counted on its being there. Do you think that, how can I put this? Do you think that it's important to kind of reclaim that the responsibilities of, taking care of these communities from institutions like that? Or do you think that, not to say like, let's bust them up or anything like that, but I mean, so that I guess this kind of care seems more attainable or doable to people who might not know otherwise. Does that make sense?
I have a thought about this, and it's kind of taking us back pretty far, like before probably what we're all remembering. But abortion is healthcare, and what the surgical procedure that someone has when they have an abortion is the same as what they would have if they had a miscarriage, which is taken care of in a hospital. And a medical abortion is essentially the same medications you would take if you had a miscarriage early in your pregnancy. It's the same exact thing, and yet if it's not treatment for a miscarriage, it's been pushed out of hospitals where all other healthcare is happening into clinics. And I think this is because of stigma, that hospitals aren't trying to be associated with the stigma of abortion. So it's pushed to these clinics that are specifically for that, which give a lot of other healthcare as well, but are not really known for that. They're known as for being abortion clinics. And I think that's kind of the beginning of all of this, is why isn't abortion just happening in the healthcare setting that most healthcare is happening? And if I was living in a perfect world, I would like to see abortions just happening as part of healthcare in hospitals. But, you know, I'm not living in a time where I can be like, here's what would be really, really great if this bad thing never happened decades ago. I'm in a time where I'm just hanging with my claws and nails to the rights we currently have and trying not to lose any more.
Yeah. On the I feel like also like on the activist end and on some, like if somebody wants to get more involved in their community, I think Planned Parenthood is kind of baby's intro to abortion rights. You know what I mean? And I think going from there, getting to know either the employees or, you know, familiarizing yourself with their literature and stuff like that and taking that back to your community if it's a care desert. It's baby's first activism step. I see it much more like that on that end.
But, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any of us have worked in any of these clinics, so we aren't exactly experts on it.
Sure.
That's very true. That's very true.
Yeah, we claim no medical expertise.
Sure.
No, none at all.
Yeah, we're not doctors.
Medical advice.
We are cartoonists.
We are cartoonists.
We draw pictures.
We are good at repackaging information into something appealing.
Can you point to sources of optimism, either in the context of this zine or maybe?
I can. We testify, I know I've mentioned them several times. We testify abortion storytelling, a nonprofit fronted by Renee Bracey Sherman, who recently put out a book about liberating abortion from white supremacy. Fantastic book. I can't recommend it enough. SAS, which is Self-Managed Abortion Safe and Supported. They have abortion safety apps that put privacy first.
They do a great training about self-managed medical abortions that I took as part of researching this book.
Yeah. Uki, which is a privacy-first period tracker. A lot of period trackers, if you don't check where your data is going, can be used against you in persecution. To be like, oh, you had an abortion. We know because we see on your period tracker that you didn't have your period. Which is ridiculous, but
yeah, there's so many reasons someone wouldn't have a period.
Right, exactly. But just in case, Uki's there. If, when, how, they have resources on internet safety and abortion legality. They're connected to the Abortion Legal Defense Fund. Plan C has very, very extensive resources on abortion pills, abortion care, financial assistance, stuff like that. Hey Jane, same situation.
Awesome.
And abortion funds. I think abortion funds are doing amazing work, and they're all over the place. You can check National Network of Abortion Funds to find the one in your region.
And I'd say on the kind of, you're asking for places of hope and optimism. I take hope and optimism from also being like deeply informed, which is not always a place to find good news.
Sure.
I read the journalist Jessica Valenti has a Substack called Abortion Every Day, where every single day since the overturn of when Dobbs overturned Roe, she puts out a missive about what is happening right now in America in abortion news. And it is, I mean, it's dark. The facts of what's happened since then are dark, but I really like knowing so that I can be focused and energized for where I'm going to put my energy.
That's helpful. I find hope in just like the people I know. I find hope in the two of you.
Yeah.
I find hope in a friend of mine who does volunteer abortion dueling once every 2 weeks at our local clinic. This is where I find the hope. I'm not finding it. I wish I could be like, well, this particular law is going to go into effect. It's going to be great. I don't have any of those. But I have my pals, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, like, abortion starts and ends with community, truly. Yeah. It's going to happen whether or not it's legal. And I think that's something lawmakers need to get through their heads.
Yeah, you can't stop abortions from happening. You can just make them increasingly
dangerous.
More unsafe.
Yeah. Well, and not just, I'm going to say this because I didn't get a chance to say this the whole time, right? Like, it not only makes it unsafe for people having abortions, but since it was overturned, infant mortality has spiked, maternal death, like parental death, has spiked. What was it? I wrote this down. Maternal deaths have spiked. Parental deaths, like the gestating parent death, has spiked 56% in Texas since Dobbs. Compared to 11% nationwide. Death, like birth, is already really intense and highly risky medical situation to find oneself in, and this has just made it so much more dangerous. But to your point, Izzy, like finding hope and love and care in the people in your life who are doing the work is also motivating and encouraging and heartening.
Yeah.
We're almost done. Can you point to any stories on how this zine has been received?
I think Graphic Medicine wrote a very, very kind review. Okay. Graphic Medicine is an organization that talks about comics related to mental health.
Sure.
Comics related to medicine, stuff like that.
Awesome.
They left a very, very kind review, if I remember right.
I know we're well on our way to selling out our first print run, so that's exciting.
Awesome. So in closing, I just kind of want to acknowledge that you each have respective careers and concerns as artists, and I wonder if you might speak to what you have done or are doing outside of this project. And I also wonder if you could say something about what you feel your roles and responsibilities are as artists as it relates to organizing. Kind of another big question.
I'll go first, I guess. So I am, like, the majority of my body of work has been longer form and short form, like fiction and poetics, but I've been doing a lot more like autobio and memoir, and I'm working on a longer kind of memoir about parenting. Like I said before, I have three small children, and I'm really excited to be working on that, and maybe you'll read it in like 5 years because it takes forever. But I'm also non-tenure track, like part-time faculty at the Art Institute of Chicago. And I think a really important part of, like, it feels like it's never felt like a more crucial time to be an educator. Like, I'm really grateful to be in the classroom every week with this cohort of students and, to be there, to be present and answer questions about what it is to be in higher education right now, what it is to be an artist right now, what it is to be a human right now, like to be able to point and gather resources like that. Being a mentor has always felt really important to me as an activist and as an artist. And I have the opportunity to do that like every week, which feels really, really grounding to me as a person and like a real gift to be able to do. And I'm still thinking about the ways that my work, which is extraordinarily slow, can respond to the world, which is extraordinarily fast. And I still don't have an answer to that, but I'm thinking very rigorously about it.
I said earlier that I really want more LGBTQIA plus education out there. And I've been contributing to biographical and autobiographical anthologies, comics anthologies that are focused on all ages stories. recently, I've worked with Marley Washington, who is the inventor of the GC2B binder, which was actually my first chest binder, to tell his story, his transition story, and how he got into inventing, essentially, and running a small business. And that's in the book, Becoming Who We Are. And it's GLAAD nominated this year, which is cool. Working somewhat on games stuff, working somewhat on writing stuff. I'm kind of all over the place in what I like to do. I don't want every day to look the same creatively. And currently I have an NDA, unfortunately, that I can't break, but I'm thinking a lot about what community looks like and what a potential future looks like in my next work, which will probably also be in like 5 years.
Yeah, it's very hard to respond in a timely manner with longer works. I mean, comics take a long time, and there's a lot of artists who will do, a 4-panel Instagram comic that they can just do in a day and throw up, and that's fantastic. And I think we all have practices, or have in the past had practices kind of akin to that. But our deeper, longer work, it's like, I'm glad I responded to this big, huge thing that happened in culture and history a year and a half after it happened at best. Abortion Pill Zine came out, a year after Dobbs?
Yeah.
And we even had conversations about it. We're like, well, do we want to just crank this out as fast as we can? Or do we want to make this as good as it can be, even if it takes longer? And we decided to make it as good as it can be, even if it takes longer. And, people need it just as much or more than they did when we first came up with the idea. So yeah, that was a tangent. My work, I've made a lot of sex ed comics. Like I said, I did the Quick and Easy Guide to Consent and Wait What, which is for puberty age people. This might be controversial. I'm not sure I do think artists have a responsibility to respond to all the world's problems. I think it's okay if you just make art because it makes you feel good. I think that's wonderful, actually, but I personally want to sometimes, and I think Marnie and Sage probably feel the same way, and most artists I know probably feel the same way, is that they want to. So I'd say about half of my work that I've published is like, oh, this is a sex ed comic. This is something that I think might do some good for the world, might do some good for some young people. And the other half is just, me talking about my feelings in little poems and trying to process different aspects of my life. Yeah. I am currently working on a deck of cards that hasn't been announced yet, but should come out soon. I also am teaching at the college level. I just started teaching at Maine College of Art and Design, which I love. And I teach pottery twice a week, which is like the epitome of just make something nice because you enjoy it and because you want to drink coffee out of it later. And the coolest thing I'm working on right now is I'm organizing a new comic show, Indie Comics Fest in Portland, Maine. That's called Camp Comic Arts Maine Portland. That's going to take place on April 5th. So very soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for walking me through all this stuff. I'm not as well versed as I would like to be, but you were very patient and I really appreciate it.
You did great.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you, Jennifer, for taking the time. That's all I got. So you all take care, okay?
Thank you so much. It was lovely to talk with you.
Bye-bye.
So nice. Thank you.
The Final Straw is a proud member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts, and here's a jingle from another member of CZN.
The border is not just a wall. It's not just a line on a map. It's a power structure, a system of control. The border does not divide one world from another. There is only one world, and the border is tearing it apart.
The Ex-Worker Podcast presents No Wall They Can Build, a guide to borders and migration across North America. A serialized audiobook in 11 chapters released every Wednesday. Tune in at crimethink.com/podcast.
And now some words from anarchist prisoner Sean Swain.
Events happening right now in the New York State prison system reveal something about the true nature of this system. But they reveal even more about the kinds of ruthless scumbags who work inside the prisons and the amount of power that even a liberal state is willing to relinquish to those scumbags. If this situation is any indication of what to expect in the future sucks. New York State's prison guards are unionized, like most guards in the U.S. But because prison guards are categorized as essential workers to the state, the union must accept a no-strike clause. That means when prison guards are seeking a new contract, they can't go on strike. It's illegal. On February 17th, New York's prison guards broke the law and went on strike anyway. Guards at 41 of 42 prisons left their posts. It's estimated that 9 out of 10 prison guards walked off the job and refused to return to work. In response, Governor Kathy Hochul deployed the National Guard. Now, just in case I have to remind you, deploying the National Guard to New York prisons has never had a good outcome. Google Attica. This time around, as the Green Goons took over the prisons, there were violent clashes at least 2 prisons, Collins and Riverview Correctional Institutions. As a consequence of this strike, most of the prisons have been on constant lockdown. The prisoners have had no access to hygiene, no psychiatric attention, in some cases, no access to medication or even to food. One of the first acts in response to the guard strike was to cancel visits, legal calls, and legal visits, hindering prisoner access to counsel and preventing the truth from inside the prison from ever getting out. So far, 3 prisoners have died from neglect as a consequence of the guards' illegal strike. Jonathan Grant, 61, died at Auburn Correctional, Anthony Douglas, 67, and Franklin Dominguez, 35, died at Sing Sing. Dominguez was scheduled for release in October. Now, some context to all of this. The guards' illegal strike isn't just some ruthless scumbags deciding to flex on the state for a better contract. This is the case of ruthless scumbags flexing so they can force the state to let them be more ruthless and even more scumbaggy. This strike coincides with a grand jury indictment where 10 corrections staff now face criminal charges for the murder of Robert Brooks, a prisoner killed on December 9th. As the officer's body camera footage showed, Brooks was cuffed and prone and was beaten to death by ruthless scumbags employed by the New York prison system. So the guard strike is very much a response to that criminal indictment. It's a protest. It's a clear declaration by the prison guards that they don't want to be held accountable for their brutality, abuse, and neglect. They want a blank check to beat, crush, and kill, taking out their terrible childhoods on humans locked in cages. Emblematic of this is their primary ultimatum. The guards demand that New York repeal recent legislation, Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Solitary, or HALT. Based on repeated, duplicated studies over decades and decades that show how long-term segregation drives prisoners mad, New York reformed its use of segregation in the best interest of the public, who really doesn't benefit from the deliberate production of mental illness. The guards want that legislation repealed. So, just to be clear here, the ruthless scumbags working in New York's prison system have collectively walked off the job, causing 2 prison riots and the preventable deaths of 3 prisoners so far, and they're doing it to fight a law in place that has the word humane right in its title. New York's prison guards are refusing to accept limitations to their brutality, not limitations that civilized society necessarily expects in the 21st century, but limitations to brutality that were accepted even by pirates in the 1600s. This is how radically ruthless and radically scumbaggy these prison guards are. I'm not sure what the New York prison hiring practices are, but I suspect they need to include a checkbox on the job applications, asking if the applicants ever ripped heads off of small puppies or kittens. That might exclude a lot of these people. In the meantime, Governor Kathy Hochul is agreeing to all of the ruthless scumbags' demands, even the suspension of the HALT Act for at least 90 days. So think about this. After 10 of the guards faced accountability for beating a prone cuffed prisoner to death, the rest of the guards broke the law and went on strike, provoking 2 prison riots and the death of 3 more prisoners. And the state has rewarded them, has acquiesced, has bent over backward to accommodate their demand to be allowed to be more ruthless. This is the epitome of rewarding bad behavior. This is happening in a liberal state with a liberal governor. I've often said there's no difference between Democrats and Republicans. They both make good hostages. I guess the New York Guards Union proved me right. When Attica prisoners took hostages and made demands, they were slaughtered at gunpoint with attack helicopters. When the Guards Union took the whole state hostage, the guards walk away with hugs and happy thoughts. This isn't just a horrible single event. It isn't just bad policy to cave in to organized terrorists with badges. This is a bad precedent because you have to believe guards unions across the country are watching the outcome to this. And each of those unions are now chomping at the bit, salivating, waiting for their chance to take their own state hostage and set the world on fire using the prison system and the prisoners held captive as pawns, as collateral to achieve their ruthless self-serving agendas, whether it serves the public good or not. You can urge New York Governor Kathy Hochul to stop this capitulation to the prison guards. Her phone number is 518-474-8390. That's 518-474-8390. Tell her that prison guards should be held to the standards of civilization in the 21st century, not violating the norms recognized by pirates in the 1600s. And tell her I said hi. This is anarchist prisoner Sean Swain from the Super Duper Uber Mega Ultra Hyper Turbo Multi Maxi Max in Youngstown, Ohio. If you're listening, you are the resistance.
You can still write Sean at his new old new again address at Sean Swain number A243205 OSP Youngstown 878 Coitesville Hubbard Road, Youngstown, Ohio 44505. You can find his past writings, updates on his case, hear his past audio, find out how to get his books, plus ways to contribute to his legal defense fund at seanswain.org. This is The Final Straw Radio. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions and suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net or thefinalstrawradio@protonmail.com. If you'd like to use any episode for your project or radio show, feel free to do so. Just send us an email to let us know. If you care to, you can send us letters at TFSR, P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina, 28816. Programming support is brought to you by Firestorm Books. Located at 1022 Haywood Road in West Asheville, Firestorm is a bookstore and social movement space owned by its workers, in operation since 2008. Their event calendar and complete catalog of books can be found online at firestorm.coop.